Today is May 12th. The time is 6:15, and I'm hereby calling to order the workshop of the City Council of the City of Groveland, Florida. We'll begin tonight with a continuation of the, first we better take roll. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sierra. Roll.
Mayor Keith Keogh.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Gaines. Councilmember Amy Jo Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Judith Fike.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Radzik.
Here.
City Manager Michael Hine. Sergeant at Arms Chief Sean Ramsey. City Attorney Anita Garasi Carver. And Deputy City Clerk Sierra Bender here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. So as I was saying, we'll begin the night with a continuation of the Community and Economic Development Department's overview and budget. Mr. Maslow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just in case you forgot who we were between now and last week, maybe we could just do some short introductions before we get started. I'm Tim Maslow. I'm your Community and Economic Development Director. Andrew, would you like to go next?
Andrew Landis with Conservation and Strategic Initiatives.
All right, Mr. Mayor. We did go through most of the slides at the last meeting. We have them today as a reference. We figured we'd hear from you today in terms of your questions and just go by one by one and do our best.
Okay. How many slides do you have altogether?
We have, I believe, over 60 slides.
60 slides. Okay, so with that, I hope everybody took good notes at the last meeting, and it's going to be, we might have to review back to some of the slides because it's hard to get the context a week later, but so we'll start this evening with Ms. Carroll.
Actually, I had a meeting with them earlier today, and for the most part, I'm pretty good. So I just wanted to ask a couple of things that I still had. Let me find them, because they were questions more for April, I think. Where was that? I wanted to ask about how much or how many of their salaries come from not the general fund, but from their department? Like how much from their revenue?
So from the building fund, the only salaries that come from there are actually, there are some from fire, which would be Frank Patterson, which is your fire inspector. And then we have a small percentage that comes for Chief Carroll, Chief Thiemann, Deputy Chief Thiemann, and Chief Smith. Those are the only salaries that are coming out of building fund.
And then I also wanted to ask, I'm going to direct this to Andrew, just so people have a better idea of what you do, because I didn't have a great idea. I'd like if you could just explain like what a general day looks like for you.
We conduct a number. For the question, we conduct numerous photometric reviews of lighting at the residential, commercial, and industrial level, also mixed-use projects. So every house or building that comes into the city, every neighborhood, every bigger project, we review all the lighting photometrics on that. It's an iterative process, so we make initial recommendations and then work with the applicant to work through every subsequent proposal until they meet our code. And we talked about the racetrack project this morning, and so that was one that, took a lot of heavy lifting from staff to get them to the finish line, which we're there today, it sounds like. So beyond that, we work on conservation land acquisition. We have a program to acquire conservation lands like the wetlands that you're familiar with out in the Palatka. We've been working over the last couple years to look at across Groveland at all the potential for conservation lands and really identifying what we'd like to protect, and the next leg of that will be to prioritize those acquisitions. I don't have a slide, but we're working on the Palatka Blue Way. You want to switch to my slide, Tim? A normal day for me, there's not necessarily a normal day for any of us on staff. We manage a number of different dynamic type projects, so every day is a little bit different. I'm involved in the rewrite of our landscape code currently, so we've been working on that with a team of people from partners to consultants. We've been working on projects to install different plantings around the city that are reflective of the direction we'll take with the landscape code. So the streetscape planting, the wildflower median, the splitter island, some of the projects along Main that we've done with tree plantings. We did a Gadsden Street tree planting 3 or 4 weeks ago, which was a second phase of that. Working with partners to build interest in Groveland for conservation, since it's a new division and a key focus of our strategic plan. Those are the types of things we do on a daily basis. And on the screen, you'll see we also have urban forestry under this. So we're looking at the tree canopy across the city and how we can enhance that. We have one of the lowest percentage tree canopies in Lake County and really in the region. And then a lot of education and community outreach, like you attended the Star Party this year. That's one of our events, the Eco Expo as well. So events that bring the community in to engage with conservation.
Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you. Ms. Fike?
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? I know we got the mic. Okay, good. I'll talk a little louder if I have to. There's a slide on here, and I think it's going backwards, that shows how many of the cities, Groveland, Mascot, and so on, how many full acres there are in each city. If we could find that slide, I've got a question. Oh, there it is. Thank you. You're good. So I'm looking at this. Groveland has 17,399 land acres. And then you look at Claremont at 13, Mineola at 7, and so on. And I'm looking at our full-time personnel for field inspectors, which we have William, thank you. And I'm kind of, sitting here going, wow. I know that we had another inspector. I believe she's no longer with us, and there may be a position that needs to be unfrozen. But what I'm looking at is we have the largest land mass there, and we only have 1 field inspector versus Claremont with 3 and Mineola and so on. So that doesn't allow William to be proactive. I think it winds up being reactive when, maybe I'm wrong, William, something comes in, I gotta go here, I gotta go there, and so on, rather than having the additional personnel out there where you can do whatever inspections you normally need to do. That's kind of the way I'm seeing that slide, and knowing that, we don't have the additional compliance officer. I think I saw somewhere that if we brought that individual on, it would be $78,000-ish, including all benefits. So I guess my curiosity question is, how do we kind of come into line with everybody else? I don't know who answers that question. Somebody can take it. It might not be you, William, but if somebody could clarify for me why we're the low man on the totem pole as far as full-time personnel when we've got the largest acreage.
Well, thank you for the question. So we did have 2 for the first approximately 4 years that I was here, and I believe for a long time before that as well. When Bernice retired about a year ago, they decided to just pause the position or freeze the position. And I do believe a second staff member would allow for more proactive enforcement. There is a lot of reactive now, just as far as being stretched thin and time constraints. I think if we had another staff member, we could focus that staff member on a certain area that is important to a lot of people, and it would just it would help, the whole process.
Thank you. There's another. Were you getting ready to say something, Mike? Go right ahead. Jump right in before I go to my next one.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Yeah, Will's exactly right. For years, there were 2 code compliance officers, and we reduced it to 1 just for a cost savings measure. But one of the things we're doing, and you may have heard about, is looking at ways to quantify the tangible benefit. As William said, he's more reactive right now. But one thing I've asked him to do is quantify the amount of liens and the value of those liens that have been accrued based on his stewardship, because that's a couple hundred to several $100,000 potentially, which would pay for another code compliance officer. Similarly, I know there's been conversations about providing more emphasis in the CRA area, which could contribute partially to that expense. There's also, you may recall a couple weeks ago, the Parks and Recreation Department and Mike Walker gave their budget presentation, and they talked about the strain that special event permitting places on that department and that staff. And it's a conversation I've had with Tim and Will about maybe moving that if we get another code enforcement officer to help take that burden off Parks and Rec. And finally, they've had a part-time staff member who recently retired who was in charge of lien reviews. Was it 300 or 600 a year?
594 last year, but off of the last 3 years is around 600 average.
Yeah, so 600, and right now we charge, I believe, $25 per lien review, whereas Claremont and other jurisdictions charge $75. So when you start thinking about the math and maybe increasing our fee in our code, it could pay for a part-time person or at least contribute to another clerical person. And I know I'll pick on Ms. Wright since she's not here this evening, but we all know the clerk has been asking for another staff, and maybe they could do lien reviews as well as provide support for minutes. So just one of the concepts that I wanted to give you an advance notice of, should we come forward either with a mid-year budget adjustment this year or incorporate that into next year's budget.
Thank you, Mike, because that was going to lead to my next question. But if we don't mind, we can take a look at it. I know there's a slide in there that shows, I think, accrued fines.
190.
There it is. Thank you.
Estimated for fiscal year 24.
Okay, and so I know from our meeting that we had that not all of that has come into the coffers of the city, so to speak.
Correct.
But if we could get it into the coffers, as Mike just so eloquently explained, and I don't have to go much further on that, it would help, I think, with some of the staff cost for that.
The 190,000, the liens are recorded. The majority of the cases are still open and they're still accruing fines. So when those cases finally come into compliance, or if they continue to be in violation, we can press forward with a foreclosure, and they will eventually have to mitigate the fines. But the majority of those cases are still open, so they're still accruing daily fines.
Okay. Thank you. I have one last question. I think it's slide 8, Tim, if you can humor me. I hope I counted right on these last week. Yes. So looking at these costs associated with planning and zoning fees and so on, so my understanding is not all these fees come to the city. Some of these fees pay out in some regard. Could you break that down and clarify that a little bit for me?
Councilwoman
Thanks.
Pike, especially the impact fees. So our department, we do a lot of revenue collecting. And impact fees, some of them go to the city in terms of parks impact fees, water, wastewater impact fees, public safety, administrative facilities. Transportation and schools we collect on behalf of both Lake County Public Schools and Lake County for the transportation. We don't necessarily see them. Ideally, they're supposed to be spent near or in Groveland, but that is one of the types of revenues we collect, but the city doesn't necessarily receive directly.
Okay.
The
Thank
rest
you.
of them, and when you're looking
sorry.
at planning and zoning fees, we do collect. A lot of that offsets the investment that you make in our department, especially in planning and zoning. Some of it also goes to public works to offset the cost of consultants through public works, whether it be half for transportation consulting or Ward and Kern for utility consulting. And those are essentially paid through development fees, passed through to offset the cost of the consultant reviews.
Okay. So if you had to give me like a percentage of that 20 mil that's paid out, do you have kind of a swag?
We're still crunching the numbers on that. We hope to provide that to you and the council in the short term.
Okay, thank you. Those are my only questions this evening.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Redzik.
Do we have an idea of the percentage of the CRA land to the overall city, overall land within the city? We'll talk about acreage.
We just did this analysis very recently. I don't have the number prepared off the top of my head.
Okay, so before I go any further, thank you, Mr. Gerling, for everything that you've done. Thank you. Forgot his name, just knew it. My Lord, talk to you later. Thanks. I forgot his name. Dwayne, oh my God. I think I need to get to a doctor, Dwayne, and thank you for the rest of you. And Mr. Maslow, I was gonna say thank you, but you blew it by not knowing the acreage. But seriously, going back to William, what is your typical day like?
Question. So my typical day starts with checking emails, returning phone calls. I'll usually do a sign sweep, particularly on Mondays because the weekends are usually a free-for-all for people putting the signs out. Then I'll also have a list of permit inspections that I'll go through, and then I'll respond to any complaints that have come in, and then the office work will usually be towards the end of the day.
What would you think would be the number of proactive calls versus someone like me calling and saying, hey, by the way, the CRA area is in disarray?
There's, I would say today, I think I received 4.
Not for me.
No, from most of the calls, honestly, come from community association managers in other communities. Because it's easier for them to have the city go in and do the enforcement so they don't have to spend money to get their attorney involved. So a lot of the calls come from the CAMs in these HOA neighborhoods.
Okay.
And there's the, neighbor on neighbor call, of course.
I'm sorry to ask you this, but do you do a war report as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I got to go back and take a look. Mr. Maslow, what role did Andrew play in our new land use code?
I have Mike actually here. Andrew actually played a pivotal role in our future land use and our code rewrite back in 2019 and 2020. I'm glad you asked. Many people know Andrew as our conservation and strategic initiatives manager, but prior to that, he was actually in Dwayne's role as our planning and zoning manager. Dwayne was a planner and grew up underneath Andrew's guidance, and we essentially promoted Dwayne. At the same time, the city philosophically made a change back with the strategic plan adopted by council in 2022. You may recall, there's actually a slide to demonstrate this. We had 5 focus areas of the strategic plan, and 2 of them were very related to both conservation and preservation. Conservation and preservation obviously related to creating the land that's set aside for the eco-agrarian lifestyle. So if you're going to have agricultural activities, you have to have agricultural property. If you're going to have eco activities, you have to have that conservation type property. We looked at the org chart, our city manager and myself, and realized if we were going to do anything in this category, we needed dedicated staff to make that happen. As the city with natural charm, most of our staff was all dedicated to development-oriented review, specifically in planning and zoning. We had 4 employees in that area at the time. We decided if we're going to be the city with natural charm and save 50% of our open space, it would probably be wise to allocate staff resources to those categories. I would say, we're working with the strategic plan committee right now as part of that 3-year review. This is one of the areas, looking back in this past 3 years, where we've probably had the most success in terms of adopting the joint planning agreement that speaks to that 50% open space goal, Conservation land acquisition, we've already almost acquired nearly half of the Plotlakaha Blueway. Wilson Island being the more complex, more expensive, but Andrew's team is working diligently on that. Dark sky lighting, that was one of the first major achievements out of the strategic plan that we created. We've achieved the certification, as you know, and we've had a lot of success in this category. Again, going back to allocating resources to that position.
By the way, no offense to any of you at all, but the one person that I hear raves about is Dwayne. I mean, every time I talk to someone, that's the first words out of my mouth. He's really, really great. No offense to anyone else, but he's really, really been quite valuable to the team.
Dwayne does a great job, and there's a very high volume. As you saw in our previous presentation with some of their slides, it's not only the annexation feature land use and zoning applications we receive, it's not only those plats that really go from pre-plat to site development plan to final plat, but every specific house that's built or every property, we have a plot plan. And that's another review that Dwayne's team of 2 has to oversee.
So going back to Ms. Fike's acknowledgement of the $190,000 worth of accrued fines which continue to accrue, I would beg you all, and I would beg the City Council not to waive these fines. We've done it year after year after year, and it is a slap on the face of the staff who basically goes out there, not to mention the city attorney. I can't tell you how many times we've accepted, 25% or 50%. You know what? People had an opportunity to get their property into code compliance before it started. So I would ask, just as from 20 years of listening to it, please, that's not a valuable source, but it definitely serves a purpose. Moving on to impact fees. So, the one thing I hear all the time is we don't have enough of schools and the roads are really lousy. Mr. Hine, has there been any discussion whatsoever on having our own separate road impact fee or our own separate school impact fee? Because if we have our own, we can control exactly what's going to get built, when it's going to get built, whether to have to go to the MPO or whether to have to go to the school board. And as you know, the school board has absolutely nothing planned for the next $200 and some odd million worth of school impact fees.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Ratzick, there's continuation of that conversation from a philosophical as well as a statutory standpoint. I think you're going to see on the road impact fee a much clearer understanding of the mechanisms and how those work through the JPA effort. As you'll recall, the JPA you all just approved requires us to come back within 6 months for a road transfer agreement. A road transfer agreement doesn't just simply say this road will stay with the county, this road will go to the city. It will also talk about level of service and how to pay for that over what period, which will include impact fees.
Okay.
Schools are a little more complicated since municipalities don't enjoy statutory authority over that. Some municipalities have their own charter schools. But other than that, it's mostly governed by state statute.
Mr. Ossie Carver, when I first got here 20 years ago, we had a school impact fee and we were collecting it for a charter school. I remember we needed to give it back because when I became mayor, we went up to the school board and we had to give it back because I guess we decided not to do it.
I'd have to go back and look. My recollection is we were involved in litigation over the impact fees, and the city ended up returning the funds to the school district because there wasn't statutory authority for a city at that time to collect school impact fees of their own.
So we did it without having the law behind us, is what you're saying?
That's what it appears.
Okay. Last two questions. Well, actually, one remark and then last two questions. And my remark is I hope that we all agree that we need an additional code inspector fund it through as many different mechanisms as we can, because again, in the Sierra area, we're busy trying to make it where when you come into the city, it's pleasant. And, I know that the landscapers and, the guys are out there that are constantly picking up trash, but, getting some of the buildings that have got all sorts of signs that you can't see in, which is against our code. You're only supposed to have so much coverage. You clearly can't do it yourself. Mr. Maslow, what is the turnaround time on actually, Mr. Gerling, what's the turnaround time on a typical building permit?
Right now, the fastest in Lake County, I can tell you that much. So it depends on what it is. If you're talking about a single-family residence, for example, me and Dwayne kind of work hand in hand, so it's kind of a race to see who gets done first. But I would say it's probably, we said, about 2 weeks typically, something like that.
And what do we aim for? What is standard, what's the standard goal or the standard turnaround time versus what we do?
By statute, it's 30 days.
Okay.
Typically, but that never comes into play with us.
Okay. And P&Z applications?
P&Z is 30 business days, the first review, and then once they do all the resubmittal process, it's 10 business days.
Okay. Mr. Mazzo, how understaffed are we?
In what area?
In the general team?
On the general team?
I mean,
I'll
what
say
happened to
this.
Brooke? We haven't replaced her yet.
We all work very hard. If you compare ourselves to other jurisdictions, in certain areas, we're a little bit more, sometimes in conservation compared to some of the other jurisdictions like Leesburg that, they obviously don't have a strategic plan where conservation or open space is a big priority of theirs, or dark skies. But when you look at planning and zoning, code compliance, areas like that, we're definitely on the lower end. I like to think we're outperforming other cities, not only just by the volume of the reviews. You have a staff that we're trying to go at the higher level. We're trying to take the city in a direction that's very intentional, very vision-based. There's a lot of thought, there's a lot of attention that goes into things like adopting and writing a strategic plan, reviewing a strategic plan, reviewing a comprehensive plan, rewriting elements based on a vision, doing a total rewrite of a land development code, constantly looking at it on an annual basis to see how we could tweak it and make improvements. There's a lot of things that I would say we exceed expectations of other jurisdictions. But again, we're aware that Groveland has a lot of ambitions, but we're also very conscious of, some budget constraints. And we're not going to come here requesting more staff that might eat into the general fund, because we know there's other priorities with the city. We're constantly working with finance. I can't tell you how many times we've probably pestered Anita to see how legally we could defend using funds from the building fund or a different revenue source, just to make sure, again, we're providing the service people are looking for, but not having a big impact to the general fund.
Someone tell me what the plans are to replace Brooke?
We plan to get into that in the next meeting with the CRA later this month, where we have a whole meeting dedicated to the CRA.
Okay. And my last comment is this. You brought out about outperforming, and we do. We do by virtue of the county entering into the JPA. We do by the way that the state has recognized Groveland and has worked with us with regards to grants. We do by the virtue of other cities basically ranting and raving about our future land use. So yes, you are an outperforming staff, and I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Appreciate your support.
Vice Mayor?
I met with Tim and the group last week, and I asked some questions at that time. And I also told them that I would be asking those questions again, just because I heard them. There may be others in the room or elsewhere that may also need to hear what I've asked. So with that being said, I would like to know if one of the takeaways or the call to action was for you all to give me a summary of like the last 2 or 3 years when Bernice was here with the code enforcement, then how did that number change with William? And did it go up, did it go down? And I'm not gonna say I didn't get it, but if I did get it, I didn't see it. So I was wondering if you all have that data for me tonight.
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor. I believe we had that conversation on doing the comparison of the last few years in terms of the numbers, if they've gone up or down in terms of code compliance cases. I believe we're still crunching those numbers. We don't have them ready necessarily for tonight, but we hope to get you a full report, hopefully later this week. And we can share that with yourself and the mayor and the council.
Okay. I think that would be helpful. We talked about the ear analysis, and I know that they have submitted a proposal. And one of the things that I have asked is that we just don't take the ear as its proposal, but add to it as necessary, including metrics. Has that gone anywhere? What is the status of the ear?
I have personally reached out to the consultant, Will Dan, to start preparing a draft for the contract. Did mention performance metrics, milestones, having a timeline, having periodic reviews, and then also enhancing the public outreach section. One of the reasons why we did recommend their services is they had the best amount of public outreach as part of the plan, which we know is very, very critical to the mayor and to the council. Just as a quick comparison, for $15,000, they were offering 3 public meetings with also attending city events with public information booths and also doing an interactive website. For the same amount, Kimley Horn was providing 1 public meeting, and that was it.
Now, Director Tim.
In terms of contracts, and I think this is where you're going, it's one thing to say you're going to do something, but it's another to actually deliver it and deliver in a timely manner. So we want to make sure, especially because we don't have a lot of time with this. This is a state requirement, and we have a certain date to deliver by. We want to make sure that every month we have a certain amount of milestones that are met so we could actually move on from there. And so we'll make sure that before this contract for Will Dan comes back to council, that those performance metrics are built into that for your review.
Well, you're correct. That's exactly where I was headed with the accountability, transparency, and metrics. Yes, it's commendable. They're going to do X amount of community, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do that. But how do you hold them accountable? And that's why I'm asking that it not just be a proposal, but there's accountability in terms of metrics. One of the other questions that I ask you all is, are there any metrics for Alpha? Are there any metrics regarding the building permits and things like that?
Jeff, would you like to speak to that first, and maybe I could follow up on that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the way the contract's written is...
Thank you. The way the contract's written is basically we provide inspectors whose job it is to inspect for the Florida Building Code, and that's pretty much what our staff has been doing. And in addition to other duties that aren't even outlined in the contract. So, but yeah, we're definitely hitting all the requirements.
And okay. Just kind of related to some of the statements that Jeff provided earlier tonight is there's a state requirement that a permit has to be addressed within 30 days. They're exceeding the expectations that's required by state by almost half. So again, that's not only necessarily just on the building department. We have other city departments that review, planning and zoning with Dwayne. Andrew has to do a certain amount of reviews on the photometric, which is basically a lighting review slide. But building is one of those areas where if they're not being addressed, we hear from it. We hear from it from the applicants, the builders, the developers. This is one area where there's a lot of volume. Historically, there's been a lot of volume over the past several years. We have, in off years, we've been around 250 to 350 homes, but usually we're on point around 500 homes a year, along with several commercial projects. We almost never have any complaints in terms of review time and inspections. And Jeff and I meet periodically every 2 weeks. We review. He also provides a report to us that's also shared in what we call the WAR, but every 2 weeks we provide that report that comes out from all of our various departments. Those reports in terms of permitting metrics and volumes, those are shared with you all as well.
Okay, I get it about the 30 days. I totally understand that you know, that is a mandate. I get it, and yes, the war reports provide information, but I would, if it's possible, I would like to see, you know, like, we know that Jeff is going to meet the 30 days because that's law, correct? Okay. Like over the year or at the quarter or at 6 months, what does it look like? How do you know, and I'm sure he is, but how do you know the subcategories, if there are any, and I'm not a building inspector, so therefore I wouldn't know, the data, like how do you monitor the data other than the 30 days? I get the 30 days, but how do you monitor as Alpha is a subcontractor to us?
Yeah, we also share a permitting software called Trackit through Central Square. The city pays for that service on an annual basis. All the data is shared both with Alpha, but then also the city. So my department, also finance, is able to pull the permitting numbers. We're able to look at the revenues. We're able to evaluate impact fees, building permit data. So that's a way for us to kind of monitor, are we hitting those marks in the contract, and what kind of activity we're also seeing.
Okay, you did tell Mr. Razik that we will discuss the personnel at the next CRA meeting. But here's just some food for thought because I discussed it last week. Let me be transparent, I discussed it last week, so I know that we're gonna bring this up, but some food for thought is, like I think I heard you say that there will be a clerk for the liens and that it will go back to the deputy's office. But the word that I got tripped up on, I believe you said, and they may be able to assist with other duties when it comes to the clerk's office. It's that word may that I got tripped up on because I believe that there's, and I don't have a clue how long it takes to do a lien. You know, I'm sure that some are more complex than others, but if you get a full-time position, is that person going to do more than liens?
Mr. City Manager, do you want me to help you out with that? Or, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Vice Mayor, sorry if I wasn't clear. Currently, the position was part-time and they retired. What I suggested that we're considering is rolling those responsibilities with enhanced revenue into a full-time position to assist the clerk with other responsibilities.
Okay, just out of curiosity, it was in the clerk's office first time around, then it went to Economic Development, CRA, right?
It was in the city clerk's office at one point, many years ago. It was ultimately moved to the building division at one point, and then it was moved to code compliance. It's one of those things that kind of has moved around quite a bit. In our research in terms of looking at the other fees established with other jurisdictions, it's typically housed in the city clerk's office because a lien search is very similar to a public records request. It is a different type of request, but similar related. I think what our conversation with the city manager is if it's only at $25 versus Claremont's at $75, having $75 times about 600 should give about 45 to 50,000 worth of revenue to the city, which might be enough to offset close to a full-time position. If they're spending less than 20 hours a week on lien searches, the other 20 hours perhaps could be used with something else with the city clerk's office.
Okay. Well, I will hold my questions that we discussed in the meeting last week. I will hold those until we have the CRA meeting at the end of the month. Just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Oh, one more question. When Brooke left and when Bernice left, well, Bernice's position was frozen or unfilled?
Bernice's position technically was filled by William. William's position as code compliance officer that he left, that was the position that we froze.
And what happens to that money that's not being used? Help me understand where it goes.
Yeah, it was a decision made by City Council last year as part of the budget process. There's some budget constraints, as you may recall. They decided to use those funds, reallocate them to other city needs, and try to see if they could get by with one person in code compliance for the year and see how that goes.
Okay. That concludes my questions, but if you all, as I explained to you all, I'm very visual, and if you could get me the data that I asked for, I would really appreciate it.
We'll
Thank
follow
you.
up on that as soon as possible.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Just a few, again, we had a meeting, and I'll recoup some of those. I know you have some comments on those, but first, on the 30 days versus 2 weeks, that's for a review, right, of the applicant. What is our average to get it approved, get the permits approved? Because review is different than approved, correct?
Planning and zoning applications or building permits?
Building permits.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. It depends on the builder, how good the builder is, how responsive they are. For example, we'll go through the first review, and let's say it gets turned down because the energy calculations aren't correct. It might take 2 weeks for them to submit the paperwork that we need to re-review, and then it just depends on where it is in the queue, but then usually less than 10 days for the next review.
9 or 10 days to get the permit?
About another 10 days. Just depends on where it's at in the queue. It depends on how many houses are already working ahead of it. That's correct.
Okay.
Now, if the applicant reaches out and says, hey, this is an emergency, can you push this one through? It's something small like that, we'll jump on it. So just
Okay,
depends
very
on what they
good.
need.
That's outstanding. On the ear, just another side comment. When we do these contracts, I think we need to have a scope document with them, and I'll tell you why, and we talked a little bit about it. For somebody to say we're going to do 3 public presentations, it doesn't fly. I've been to public presentations where there's 6 people in the audience. There's a certain amount of impacts or impressions you have to get in order to have something statistically viable. And when we do 18 here and 10 here and 5 here, and that we've completed the 3, it doesn't work, and it's not getting the city or you all the information that you honestly need to make the right decisions. And so in the scope document, I would think that you would go to somebody, Mr. City Manager, and get the statistical, for 1% is 100 people out of 10,000, or 100 homes out of 10,000 homes. How many that needs to be in order to have a confidence that that's there. And there might be some marketing research or something that can be done that gives you more viability than just saying who's going to come to Lake David or who's going to come here to give us their opinion. So that scope document might be something you'd want to look at. Training and service on the budget. You took it down a little bit, right? It's under printing and, was it printing and training and stuff, $4,000, was that right? Did I read that
We
right?
try to review a few items across the board in multiple divisions to help reduce some costs, but I do believe we talked about some overall training citywide for customer service.
Customer service training, perfect. So we're on track with that. On code compliance, who enforces the dark sky code? Who enforces the code for dark sky? We're number 2 and number 1 and all that. Who enforces it?
Thank you, Mayor. We have not had a code compliance case yet, but as it's written in the code, code compliance would enforce a code violation if we were to have one relating to dark sky. On an inspection level, our building inspectors inspect the dark sky lighting after it's installed.
So have we not had one because we haven't gone out and looked, or we didn't have anybody to go look, or we haven't had one because we don't think that there's any out there, even like down Broad Street or anywhere?
So I have not had one reported. Similar to the fire code, I do enforce, Frank Patterson will go out and do inspections with me, and he will let me know what is in violation of the fire code. And under one of our ordinances, I will enforce that and bring it to the special magistrate. It would be similar with this code.
I will add to that, there are a lot of existing lights that are out there that were installed at the time of the dark sky lighting code when that was adopted. Those are allowed to be non-conforming until they're looking to replace them. I believe they have until August of 2032 if it's a non-city light. And that's for existing lights, not as we get new light permits coming in with new buildings and new houses. That goes to that photometric review that we were talking about before that Andrew reviews.
And for that
3
reason,
years in, right? I'm sorry, Andrew, but we're 3 years in, so that's 1,500 homes, based on 500 homes a year that should all be code compliant?
Starting in 2032, they will have to start getting into compliance if they start when they start replacing their light fixtures.
No, I'm
Correct.
having a failure to communicate. We had this code. Everybody that was built after the code was adopted should have had their, I don't care whether it's a custom home or a developer home or a barn, right? Should have had they should be in compliance right now, correct?
If the application was approved after the adoption of the dark sky ordinance, so the 2 communities that primarily applies to are Rainwood and Cypress Bluff. Most of our other communities were approved prior to that adoption of that, where we still had some dark sky policies in place, but not the ones that we have today. So, for example, Trinity Lakes, they have to meet a 3,000 Kelvin temperature. A lot of the other parts of the city, it's 2,700 because the dark sky lighting ordinance evolved over the years.
We have somebody measuring that, that's what I'm saying. We have somebody seeing if we're in compliance.
Yes, sir.
Okay. A thing that I addressed the city manager on as I go through the report, and I've talked to Mr. Maslow about it, we cherry pick cities to compare ourselves with. For a number of employees, we have one set of cities. For conservation employees, we have another set of cities. We kind of cherry pick things that support a certain view. Whereas I think what would be better for us is to have a standard set of cities that we benchmark against all those things instead of just going here and there and here and there to try to support a certain point of view. If we could do that, I'd appreciate it. Development, what is our number of homes this year versus last year? Are we on track?
About 249 or 250. It's probably a little bit over since we've ran the report, but a little over 250 about mid-year, which is about on pace with some of our all-time highs, around 500 per year. It's not a guarantee we're going to hit 500 this year, but it's on pace for that.
Okay. In your conservation and preservation, what is the metric that you use to, you start the year with a goal, and what's your metric? What do you measure against for your year?
come from the strategic plan. And we have acres of new designated conservation lands within our ISBA, the percentage of our city's utility service area dedicated as agriculture or conservation, which we continue to add to, the number of city-owned or leased lighting fixtures installed or replaced to meet dark sky standards, and the number of trees inventoried on city properties and within city rights-of-way. And I'll just add that we're currently working on analyzing our level of service standards in our comprehensive plan and looking at how we can use metrics in the comprehensive plan and in the strategic plan more effectively and marrying them up in cases that makes sense.
Okay, so the metric of success is that now we have 49.6% in agriculture or conservation. How much did that go up this year?
Roughly 0.1%.
Was that the 700 wetlands, 750?
Yes, sir. That and some other lands that we end up adding through developments that come in when they have to dedicate part of their land to open space.
As we talked about this, I really like, Mr. Manager, I really like, and you're going to think I'm crazy, but to look at a mitigation concept for agricultural land. When we take agricultural land and turn it into a subdivision, we should have mitigation on agricultural land bought. No different than when I take land and it affects the wetlands, I got to go buy a certain amount of acreage somewhere else to mitigate that so that we can maintain some of this percentages. I'd appreciate it if we could look at that. I'll move on to impact fees. I got a hold of an impact fee. I think you might have sent it to me. But the water conservation review fee for $95, where does that go? What department does that go to?
Public Works to offset their position for water conservation.
For conservation, okay. And then zoning fee, commercial, $750. Who gets the zoning fee?
Planning and Zoning Division.
Okay. And that goes against labor, or that goes against your cost?
Time for review.
Okay. Commercial plan review, like $1,182. Who gets that?
That's part alpha, part of the city.
Part alpha, what is that, 60-40, 50-50? 60-40, you get the 60? You get the 60, okay. New commercial engineering review, $750. Who gets that?
For commercial engineering?
A fee for new commercial engineering review and inspection, $750.
Public Works is for engineering.
Public Works. Oh, did he leave? Oh, there he is, back there. Okay. Fire plan review. Who gets the fire plan review?
The fire department. Frank Patterson is our fire plan review.
And then who gets the fire inspection fee?
Fire department.
The fire department. So the $400 and the $200 go to the fire department to offset their cost, and that would be the inspector that you talk about, okay? The administrative fee, that's all it says. Where does it go? $722. General fund. The filing fee, that's not the filing fee is another $722 for electronic filing fee? Electronic filing fee, 700. General fund.
Maybe that helps offset the cost of the software, the track it services.
And the commercial building and commercial fee, $2,365. Where does that go?
60-40 split, alpha and
on the building fund.
Interesting, okay. The $4,000 to upgrade or to subscription for software, is that the software you were just talking about, the one that you used for the $4,000? Is that an annual subscription or an upgrade in the subscription?
It's annual subscription with central services.
Okay, very good, along with the other questions I asked, but I would really get on this agricultural mitigation because if we use our money to purchase grasslands that are already protected, protected by the state, we can do no more with those than is already being done. We maybe should look at under preservation and conservation. Preservation was preservation of agriculture. Preservation was a lot of stuff, not just old buildings. and we need to take a look at that.
Mr. Mayor, to your credit, too, it's a conversation we've been having at the staff level, along with the Strategic Planning Committee, and we expect that, as Andrew alluded to roll into the comprehensive plan update that we talked about with the the evaluation appraisal. We see a big opportunity to expand to the conservation element, potentially looking at an impact fee there, but then also relating this agricultural mitigation with the transfer of development rights strategy that we've been talking with Commissioner Sean Parks in Lake County on. So the big opportunity is people, what you don't see from our department typically, there's a lot of applicants that ask to rezone agricultural or conservation properties to say something like residential or commercial. We know that we're moving the needle away from that 50% goal. So we tell them, up front that, you're not going to receive staff's recommendation for this. 9 times out of 10, they drop the application. But if we could start getting more strategic in terms of where we want that agriculture and where we want that conservation, say along the Platlacaha Blueway, then all of a sudden we could start having developers who are developing in areas that are closer in proximity to infrastructure to buy those rights, buy those acreages near those more environmentally sensitive areas.
But even if you bought out the county land that is agricultural right now, then you could annex it, and that would be your and it doesn't add a lot to the tax rolls. And that's where I'm coming from. We have pockets all over this city where we could take those, go ahead and buy them out, and then annex it in. And we're not doing, high density, stuff that costs us a lot of money. It really drops some dollars to the bottom line. So I appreciate what you all are doing. I would go back and say, no, I won't. I'll hold that. But the strategic plan committee is very, very important, and defining that to a point where you can have a metric that can measure your success year to year. So nobody's asking you, what do you do every day? Because it's there. What are we doing on, I can't answer the question, what are we doing on dark sky, right? Who's doing what? How's it being inspected? You got landscape codes coming up. All I say is, that's another person. Who's gonna go inspect if you're cutting crepe myrtles right? That slide, murder and crepe myrtle. We're not gonna be expanding government to go watch them cut crepe myrtles, but how are we gonna do that, And that's a metric. At the beginning of the year, this is what we're going to do, and at the end of the year, this is what we've done, and we've succeeded here, and we're this much closer to our objective, right?
We appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to add education. It doesn't have to be so top-down, heavy-handed, all policy-driven. A lot of it can be through education. Thank you.
More like a city than a HOA. Wow, that would be great. That would be great. Does staff have any questions? No? Any other questions from the?
Yeah, I got one simple one. 252 number of trees inventoried on city properties and within the city rights of way. How many of those were in Lexington Village? Since I know that you inventoried those trees.
Well, we didn't actually inventory those formally yet, so we started that project on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be mostly the old downtown, south of 50, north of 50, what we think of as the old grid on the hill. We will be expanding that out to some HOA neighborhoods, including Groveland. We're looking at 20 trees that we're planting a couple years ago on South Lake Trail. We're going to start on that. So we're adding to that number. That's a metric where we had a tried and true number from that fiscal year, but we're continuing to add.
Public service announcement. Andrew, an arborist, and William came out and gave me an education as to this tree's dead or dying. And why is it dying? Well, we had grass growing straight up to the trunk of the tree, and there should be about a 12-inch diameter, not with mulch in it, not enclosed with cinder blocks or nothing. And this tree here, look at the roots; they're on top of the dirt versus below soil or not. But he gave me a really, really good education, and that's why I was asking, because we spent almost 2.5 hours, and I just replaced 15 trees on the right-of-way with maples. So,
excellent.
And again, it was because of you and the rest of the staff. So
They should all be olive trees because they don't require water and they're beautiful.
But it's not a canopy tree.
Incredible.
Right?
Yeah, no, it has, come on out and see my olive tree.
I'm still waiting for my
That's a
Next
piece
year,
of,
it took an hour and 45 minutes for this. So when we're scheduling next year, let's put that in your little thing so we make
We'll add
sure.
that as a metric, Mr. Mayor, too.
and we allow olive trees in the landscape code. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council. We appreciate the dialogue and the guidance as always.
Hmm? 30 feet. They branch out there 30 feet. Required, I've never even put a drop of water on them. Yeah, the desert plant.
But, so how does that measure up against the one? Because you told me that you found out that olive trees have the same soil
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. TJ Fish, Director of Transportation and Public Works. You already know April and Pam from Finance. I do want to introduce Paola Vasquez. She is the Executive Assistant to the department, and she assists with many things, including preparation of the budget. So I'll be mentioning more about her and other personnel as we go. I'm going to jump right into it because community and economic development took most of my time. And 8 o'clock, we'll see how we're doing. So let's just jump in. So we'll talk about the scope, the divisions. Do note, this is a lot more layered department than it appears on the surface. Because when you think of public works, people go, well, what's that transportation part about? We'll talk about that. And then what else falls under public works? Our staffing, what we do, some of the highlights, some of the challenges, and goals for the future. So this presentation, admittedly, will have a slightly different tone than some of your other departments. And there's a reason why that we'll work through as we go. So we have administration, myself, Paola, and others help run the department administratively. Utilities is kind of its own thing because it is an enterprise fund. So it's part of this department, but it's important enough that we're separating it out. The workshop on June 23rd will cover the Utilities Enterprise Fund in depth. I'll make a few references to utilities, but this is not a utilities presentation tonight. Streets and right-of-way, that is definitely public works. Stormwater, which we'll talk more about now, is not even its own division yet. Facilities management, so all of our buildings, our fleet, our solid waste programs, both for residential and commercial. Water education, it's not just conservation, it's helping people understand about their own usage, and that's a big change this year that we'll talk about. Engineering, so that covers a lot of different areas, including development review and inspections. We'll talk about that. And then transportation's become its own little area that did not even exist in Groveland back in 2018 when I joined the city under Mr. Hine. So I provided a couple of years ago, we did develop a mission statement for the department, providing naturally charming public services while utilizing an asset management approach to plan for the city's infrastructure systems in coordination with local, regional, state, and federal agencies, with an emphasis on innovative funding opportunities and environmental protection. Now, there are strategically several key phrases in there that are really part of the magic of how this department's even able to do what it does. So we are responsible for all infrastructure of the city. And when we talk about rights of way, bear in mind, we're talking about the publicly dedicated land, not just the street. It's that right of way has a lot of stuff in it. It might be a street, could be a sidewalk, could be utilities, could be stormwater. So just keep that in mind when you see rights of way, is we're maintaining the property that is non-real estate right of way. And then we've got the facilities that includes all the structures, but not the parks. Restrooms, yes. Pavilion, maybe, but the park itself falls under Mr. Walker's department. So asset management, maintenance of vehicles, big part of it. We're suboptimal when it comes to asset management. There are many ways we can do better, and we're going to talk about that. But in terms of asset management, that has always been the goal of keeping accurate, up-to-date records on how we're maintaining vehicles, doing replacement based on age or use or repair histories. Same thing with our buildings. We want to take an asset management approach to make sure we're optimizing efficiencies for the city of Groveland. Also under the department, solid waste, 2 different contracts, one with Waste Connections for residential trash services, the other with GFL Environmental for commercial. Contract management also through Woodard and Curran of the operations and management of our systems, as well as engineering contracts for utilities and other types of engineering such as stormwater. Water education, this is not just a nice thing to do, it's not just helpful to our customers. You have to show a sincere and earnest conservation program in order to stay in the good graces of the state under the consumptive use permit requirements. And then as far as engineering, we've got a in-house consulting engineer. Herman's part-time. Herman's been with us now 3 going on 4 years. He's shifted into a semi-retirement mode. And so he's definitely still helping us as our city PE, mostly doing development review, focusing on stormwater, focusing on inspections, including those individual grading inspections of the lots. One of the issues I ran into when I came here is we had a lot of complaints about pocket flooding. And as we got into the causation, one of the reasons was A lot of builders were not actually following the grading plans for their lots, and we didn't have someone inspecting that, and that's all been addressed now. So transportation, again, that wasn't even part of Public Works. In fact, we weren't even called that. We were called Public Services. Back in 2019, Public Services, just as a reminder for those of you that were not here, it included just about everything. Public services, including utilities, all the normal public work stuff, and parks. Same crew doing everything. So that has slowly changed. So now we have a transportation program, lots and lots and lots of coordination with the Florida Department of Transportation, Lake County, whether it's their Public Works or Lake Express through their transit program, Parks and Trails, and then there's the regional agency, Lake Sumter MPO, who is all about getting the money. We also coordinate with state agencies like the Department of Environmental Protection, our Water Management District, the Regional Planning Council, Florida Commerce, who has the CDBG program, for example, some other grant opportunities, and then Lead Lake. We do get, from time to time, inquiries that do fall under my department of can we support an economic development project? Do we have the water? Do we have the sewer? Other administration, I want to make sure it's clear that it's me. It's Paola as executive assistant. We have Ricky Rodriguez, senior operations manager, who's not up here at the table for a reason. He gets up really early every morning and he runs the crew. He's not really part of the administration in terms of what we're doing tonight with the budget. He's aware of the budget. He works with Paola and I on the budget, but really it's about the maintenance crew and the guys that you'll see on the org chart here in a few minutes. Samantha just joined us on April 14th as our water education specialist, so she's part of our administrative team and customer service. We have an administrative assistant position that's currently vacant that was recently created as a repurposed position. I had an open maintenance worker position and started to fill it and had to pause and say, well, if I really am candid about the truest needs of my department, we need more cerebral administrative help, another brain in the office to keep everything moving. We have a substantial volume of processing of purchases, P-card purchases, invoices that have to be reviewed and signed, purchase orders that have to be opened, payroll, just all the things that are part of running a department. And it really cannot be effectively done with just two people. So the administrative assistant position was a huge priority, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what that person will be doing as they're brought onto the team here in the coming weeks. And then I mentioned Herman as our city consulting engineer. I call him part of our administration because he does help us with some of the compliance requirements with the state that does fall under administration. This org chart's a little bit different. I can admit that artistically I could improve on this, but basically at the top you have me as director. You have to the left executive assistant, Paola, with the administrative position, assistant position under her that will soon be filled. And then we are supposed to have a new temporary employee coming on again to fill in the gap, assisting us more as an office associate, kind of a lower level position of just keeping the paperwork moving. I mentioned earlier Ricky's role as operations manager. He's over Julio. Julio really focuses on facilities primarily, but he is a supervisor. And for example, if Ricky's away for some reason, or for example, on medical leave, we would ask Julio to work with the guys under my directorship. Under both Ricky and Julio, we have several maintenance workers, two of them dedicated to facilities. That would be Julio and Javier. And then we did have a third maintenance position that, again, you assess your needs, you want to be cost effective. We realized having an in-house janitorial person dedicated to buildings like City Hall, the Annex, and this building that we're sitting in, that's Glory's position. And I will tell you, staff all over the city is glad she's there. Just to note, we still consider Charles Henderson part of our team, but he's technically under Chief Ramsey's police department budget, and he's dedicated to the public safety building of keeping that building maintained and clean. So I just mentioned him. He's not on my org chart. We have one mechanic with one other maintenance worker that assist as needed. That one mechanic plus the help, they run the shop. You'll see the several other there. We've got 7 other maintenance worker positions, and we'll revisit that a little bit later when we talk about staffing needs. Then up at the top, finishing out the department, I already mentioned Samantha in her water education role, Herman in his consulting role, and don't forget, we have Ben Von Haars now that has joined us from Missouri recently, left Woodard & Curran there joined Woodard and Curran Groveland project. He's been on board for a few weeks. Posh has been promoted to assistant project manager, and they're currently overseeing 18 staff members. Now, I will mention, when I come back to do the utilities budget, we'll talk about their budget and the fact that there are some new positions proposed for the upcoming year, FY26, which for them, Woodard and Curran, they call it, it will be year 7 of the project, the Groveland project. So we are finishing out 6 years in the partnership. So that's the org chart. Summary, 16 employees, directly city employees that are part of the department. We have only 2 of them salaried, exempt employees, me and Ricky. We have Paola in her executive assistant role with the admin assistant to be filled, and Samantha in the water education role. Mechanic and 7 personnel to help in maintenance. Bear in mind, that's split between streets, stormwater, and the State Road 50 beautification project, which is the 6-mile maintenance of State Road 50 throughout Groveland. And then we have 3 facilities personnel, again, Julio supervisor, Javier doing maintenance, and Glory doing janitorial. Outsourced, Herman is outsourced. It's a general funded position as far as consulting. We have 20, again, with Woodard and Curran currently, with 4 more to be added in the upcoming year. The office the office associate role is really a temp employee. And again, that is currently open but about to be filled. We do utilize, we have multiple planning and engineering contracts, but this department predominantly uses half associates and Woodard and Curran for planning and engineering. And when I say planning, it's really utility master planning that then at some point moves into utility engineering. Half helps a lot with traffic. All those traffic impact analyses we have half do. They do stormwater along with Woodard and Curran. They assist us there. And then some additional consultants that the department uses, compliance with our state consumptive use permit for water, stormwater compliance. So I'm going to repeat this phrase a lot, MS4. It's a permit held by the city of Groveland from the state. It's for municipal separated stormwater systems. And so that has a lot of compliance requirements, and we do augment that with the consulting firm. And then finally, we have a long-standing consultant that has assisted the city in building its GIS and maintaining geographic information systems, because that was just one of those areas I recognized when I joined Groveland that we knew we needed to have in place. That somehow still stayed under my department, but we're transitioning GIS more and more toward IT's management of that. So, and there is a theme. This is one of those departments where it doesn't matter whose job description or what department that's supposed to be. We do whatever it takes to just get it done for the city of Groveland. So, how do we fund all this? I'm breaking it down very simply that streets, fleet, facilities, solid waste, transportation, stormwater for now, all of those fall under your general fund. And I'm one director that is not my budget. It is not my money. It is the city of Groveland and the taxpayers' money, and general fund means general fund. The city, all the departments typically have some reliance on the general fund. Now, the fact that utilities is under the department and it's an enterprise fund, that definitely adds a different flavor. When Tim was talking earlier, we talked about those fees that are collected in his department. Well, it was mentioned it goes to Public Works. Well, that's engineering. That's a general fund expense. So, yeah, those fees may be collected by another department, but they go into a general fund, and then that's how finance pays for whatever this department's budget is, because we've already identified it as a general fund need. So I mentioned utilities, water conservation is also paid for out of the enterprise fund, and then administration is split. Part of mine and Paola's time certainly can be justified out of the utilities enterprise fund, as well as the remainder being out of general fund. So this is just a quick slide that I will use again on the 23rd, but it's what utilities does. And, you know, we have 5 water treatment plants, 2 wastewater plants, 2 reclaim facilities. We'll talk about Greasezilla next time, which is a general fund item that we receive revenue but no expenses, which I love. And anyway, the one thing I want to point out there, bullet point 3, utilities is proactive, no longer reactive. And that's because the city outsourced this to Woodard and Curran. I assure you, back in 2018, 2019, when I was getting to know the utilities, when it was under public services, it was completely reactive and not very well at reacting. Now that has completely changed. I would characterize Woodard and Curran's approach as not only proactive, but preventative and predictive in cases. So with that, I wanted to jump in just to hit real quick. Enterprise Fund, again, covers the water education program. And this is really more about education than enforcement. I think you heard that earlier, talking about enforcement. We like to educate first. And I did want to mention on Samantha, we restructured the job description. It literally used to be an enforcement position. We now have Samantha working directly with City Hall customer service and really taking an ambassador approach toward how she interacts with our residents and customers. So key activities, I broke down each of these divisions a little bit, that just making sure you're familiar with what it is we're referring to, that this is really me with some help, whether it's from our traffic consultants or from the planning team or from Herman. You know, we are doing all those things that are needed with DOT, including Florida's Turnpike, as well as Lake County, the MPO, and our neighbors. Herman and I, along with consultant support from Half Associates, along with other departments, including Mr. Maslow, including Eric Thiemann from Public Safety, including, we have a couple representatives from the police department, Sergeant Pena and Officer Vinson helping with traffic, Brenda Toscano. We all work together on this task force to address neighborhood traffic and parking issues. So that's part of transportation. Other priorities under transportation have been the State Road 33 realignment project that goes under construction next year. And now we've got us finally moving forward with Secretary Tyler's commitment of some sort of study that is supposed to eventually become a PD&E study of State Road 19. So we're making progress on that. Take a multimodal approach here in Groveland. It's not just about the roads and streets. We want to make sure we're covering bicycle pedestrian issues. And we do embrace having a fixed route transit service here in Groveland, serving South Lake County along Route 50. Also, huge area is reviewing developer proposals. We've had a lot of those the last few years. And it does take a substantial amount of time. And that time does have to come from the director a lot of times to guide and just ensure that from a utilities infrastructure standpoint, we've covered everything in those reviews. And so with limited staffing, we do everything we can to make it go right. And then finally, there's funding agreements that we do as part of transportation. We're always negotiating out to make sure that the developer's making the improvements that are needed. For example, next week, you'll hear on the agenda an agreement with the racetrack that's attempting to open at US 27 at O'Brien Road next to Kroger. They, for them to be able to move forward, they don't have their required traffic signal in place. But we were able to work with them on an agreement that will come before you that will allow an interim safety solution until that signal is able to be built and operational. So that was one of the things. Had we not had a transportation program, I'm afraid that would have been completely missed otherwise. So we used their own traffic study. We pointed out we cannot let you open and have cars pulling out onto 27 without a traffic signal. So they have gone in this past week and installed what's called a directional median opening and completely physically restricted left turns, which makes it an entirely safer situation. That's all under your transportation program. General, also engineering, we've got, again, Herman doing what he's doing. It's not just him, though. He's augmented with having consultant engineers that when we review a big project like Bright Hill, that one was reviewed for a year and lots of tied into it. 500 housing units off of 19, lots of stormwater issues, lots of flood zone, lots of utilities. So that's an area where it would not just be on one Herman Tirado to review, that we bring in the consultants on that. So Herman's focus really, his forte is streets and stormwater. He's assisted me greatly on pavement management, which is basically we hired a consultant to gather pavement condition data. So we've got that data, and it's great to have this information because it helps guide making good decisions on, well, which roadway should we resurface first? Thing is, we've got all this data, and we kind of know what we need to do. It's just a matter of having the funding to do it. So he also helps with development plan review, as I mentioned earlier, doing the site inspections. Big help on helping to solve localized flooding issues. He's kind of a crossover and coordinating with community and economic development. And then also helps me in coordinating, creating development agreements as needed. Under administration, I mentioned before, It's me and Paola, and then we've got support from Ricky. Our forthcoming administrative assistant will be a huge help. Julio is our facility supervisor, and then Herman is city engineer. And I wanted to mention this administrative assistant. I want to be very clear, this is not just one more person in the office. What we are missing in the non-utilities part of Public Works is someone dedicated to building the asset management program in terms of a software platform, using the Tyler technologies that we have available. We just don't have a person to fully implement it, and having them dedicated to putting it in place. And when I say asset management, it starts simple. It's work order systems, it's tracking those work orders, it's determining needs, creating those metrics that we all want, and then it's evolving it into what do you need under the facilities asset management? What are we doing to track the repairs and the maintenance needs and what the annual maintenance calendar looks like? For fleet, it's pretty straightforward. Of course, you want a replacement program. You want to be looking at what's the age, what's the mileage, what's the repair histories, and intellectually, we all understand that, of course, that's what we need, but you got to have people to get you there. And so we've had several starts over the last couple of years of attempting to build this. I've lost staff, had to start over, lost staff, started over, and now we're just going to dedicate this administrative assistant position to helping build that, get it working. We'll get through an entire budget year of still building it and then start reaping the rewards. I want to be able to come back next year in spring with my budget and have all these metrics now evolving to where I can report to you. This is what we're seeing the numbers suggest to us. Lots of intergovernmental coordination under my department, as evidenced by the JPA that recently, thank you for getting that across the finish line here at the council. Looking forward to the Board of County Commissioners doing the same. And then there's more work to do. We got to figure out what the deal is going to look like to do roadway transfers, because every time I talk to the county staff, they just want you all to take them. And so, well, aren't you going to do some maintenance on those roadways first? But we'll talk about that at a later time. Represent the city through administration on all infrastructure and facilities issues. We're located on Sampy Road, along with the Woodard and Curran team. We're out there at the water plant 2. Woodard and Curran's right next to us. All of us in manufactured buildings, I might add. We did get rid of the aged double-wide trailer that was the basically the legacy of public services for years. Got that off-site here just recently in anticipation of the Sampy wastewater plant expansion. But all of our manufactured buildings are now all together within the water plant campus. And then finally, we have maintained a static maintenance worker staffing since I've been here. In fact, we've actually lost staff, but we've gained it in other ways, and I'll talk about that as we go. So April's here next to me. There's the administration division budget. She's got some highlights that she can hit, and I'll be glad to speak to any of those at the appropriate time. April, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Thank you, TJ. So for the administration division budget, as TJ mentioned, this is mostly him and Paola in this section. So for 23-24, this division was not created until FY24. So you see no charges in 23, and FY24, you see that the total activity was $172,097. In 24-25, we budgeted $101,200. Year to date through March, the end of March, we've spent $52,225,000 on that. And then the proposed budget for FY26 is $206,400. So what you see with the 2.7 increase in personnel services reflects the baseline salaries with no changes in staffing level. So at the time that I did this slide, we did not have the administrative assistant approved at that, so the administrative assistant is not included in this. So when you look at that, you're looking at basically increasing that by about 63,000, by 63,000, which includes your benefits. So your workers' comp, medical, dental, et cetera. The 102 increase in operating expenses is attributed to professional services, contract services, and to moving some of the operating costs from the streets and stormwater division to the administration division.
And it is absolutely budget time. In fact, the recent changes for the department, I want to congratulate Paola. She will have to step out here. She's got a family obligation, so I'm going to let her off the hook. But she was recently promoted. Her title stays the same as executive assistant, but she has been officially, her job description was updated. She now has supervisory responsibilities, so she will be managing personnel, including the administrative assistant, under me. And then also, she is one of those people that she didn't wait for an adjustment. She was doing the job already and is now recognized that she's been an integral part of putting together the departmental budget, including last year, this year as well. And so I applaud the fact that she's been able to advance in her role as executive assistant. And then, as we mentioned, did not put in the slide, did not want to pull today's slides and start over, so we wanted to acknowledge to you here in person that we are going to be including the personnel cost of the admin assistant to this at approximately $63,000, and then we'll be deducting for now, that position was repurposed from a maintenance worker position, but I'll be speaking to that need in just a moment. Then we get into fleet. Thank you. So with fleet, this is asset management of the vehicles and heavy equipment. It includes procuring and the retirement and replacement program. Again, one mechanic. And if I could characterize this accurately, our fleet maintenance division is basically a really, really focused Jiffy Lube that predominantly serves the police department vehicles, but then also is there to support the other city vehicles, whether it's Mr. Hines or mine, Woodard and Curran vehicles, as well as the fact that some of the fire vehicles we can also service. If it's complex or if it's diesel, we're going to outsource that. The focus is absolutely on customer service and being responsive, getting people scheduled in and out predictably, and definitely police department's our #1 customer. Okay, under the fleet division, I'm going to turn it back over to April to do the summary.
Okay, so for FY 2023, you see that we did $345,709 in total. You had in FY 24, your total activity was $482,761. For FY 25, we budgeted $560,900. Oh, did you? I'm sorry, I didn't. My apologies, I didn't. I'm looking at it on mine. In FY 25, year-to-date through March, we have spent $127,478. So the proposed budget request for FY 2026 is $333,000. With that, you see a 5.1 K increase in personnel services that reflects the baseline salaries, no increase in This is a modest increase in overtime, FICA, retirement, and workers' compensation, and a 10% estimated increase in benefits. So one of the things is, in the past, we have not budgeted typically in this for overtime, a higher amount. We've been looking at it. We've been seeing that costs have been coming in a little bit higher, so we did do a little bit of a bump in that for the overtime, which then affects the FICA and the retirement. Your 7K decrease in operating expenses is attributed to small tools and equipment and operating supplies and licenses and renewals.
Thank you, April. Jumping into facilities, so maintaining the city buildings, that could be repairs, that could be renovations, janitorial as well. In-house, my guys can replace a door, they could even maybe move a wall, but if it's anything substantial, if it's a licensed job, we're going to have to be outsourcing any of that type of work. So again, we want to take an asset management approach. The building of all buildings that concerns me the most is public safety complex, as it's a whole new arena of facility management for the city as compared to this building that we're in or our 1960s city hall. We are very reactive, so again, having only 2 real staff members to do facilities work, it's going to be somewhat reactive. Again, I've mentioned 1 supervisor, 1 maintenance worker, 1 janitorial, and then we've got Charles under PD budget at the public safety building. April, if you can hit facilities.
Okay, so for facilities in FY 23, we had a total of $550,475. In FY 24, your total activity was $486,674. For FY25, the budget was $1,049,780. Year-to-date through March, we've spent $193,791. Your FY26 proposed budget is going to be $1,204,700. So the 7.3K increase in personnel, again, reflects the baseline with no changing in staffing levels, a modest increase in overtime, FICA, retirement, and workers' compensation, and a 10% estimation in increase in benefits. The 4.8 increase in operating expenses is attributed to janitorial services, utility services, and repair and maintenance on our buildings. The 142.8K increase in capital outlay is attributed to projects that were budgeted for FY25 that we've kind of postponed to and deferred to FY26 in addition, boy, I cannot speak, in addition to new projects for FY 2026.
And I'm going to show a slide here. I'm going to show a slide here in a little bit that will go into the capital that April was just referring. But I wanted to use the building we're sitting in. I keep saying that for a reason. The building that we're sitting in, the Puryear building, we've had $200,000 in the budget for that one. And there was a time when I thought I was really going to spend that money. And then I've paused because I continue to attend meetings about vetting a municipal complex. So we're keeping the money in there because my biggest fear is this building is overused. You use it for all of your sunshine meetings, and it's not just yours and the CRAs, it's planning and zoning, it's code enforcement, it's other committees that meet from time to time. I think we said CRA, but it's also the fact that it's rented out for the public use. And almost every weekend, we've got a conflict of trying to clean this room up after having public meetings and getting it ready for private use, and then doing it all over again Monday morning in anticipation of sunshine meetings. So I'm telling you, this building's overused. I am so happy we got through the South Lake Chamber breakfast and we didn't have a backup in the bathroom like we usually do. So I'm sharing this because the answer is not a plumber. It's to go in and completely rip out everything underground all the way to the manhole in Cherry Street to replace this antiquated infrastructure that's leading to issues with the restrooms, issues with the kitchen. So there has been a time where we were looking at renovation. Now we're starting to look at potentially replacement, but we're not the policy makers, you are. So we're keeping a contingency line item in the budget in case something dramatic needs to happen, and we do need to be able to move quickly. So that's just one example of why the budget's this way, because sometimes I'm asking to budget things that I really intend to do that year, and sometimes it's we better just have that money available just in case. So that's facilities. Then we get into streets. And let me start with streets with a story that ties directly into what I just said. So I started off October 1st with all these things I wanted to do with the streets budget, including maybe some resurfacing, definitely some traffic calming, safety improvements like speed tables and raised crosswalks. And then on October 9th, Hurricane Milton hit. And after all the debris removal was paid for, guess whose department that came out of? And it's all general fund. So remember, not my money, not even your money. It's the public's money in our budget, but it's general fund, which means whatever it takes to be able to pay the bills, we had to get that debris out of here. So I've just stopped spending everything. There's no speed tables, there's no extra, only the stuff we absolutely have to do, but that's how we started off this year. So I just want to mention that because you'll understand why I'm anxious to one day actually get resurfacing to happen in Groveland. So we have under streets, we have Ricky and the 7 maintenance workers. I wanted to remind 2 of those workers are dedicated to State Road 50. And for those of you that may not remember, because the tipping station for all the trash trucks is right there at Stampy and 50, it's not just our trash trucks from Waste Connections, it's other companies too that have to come into that location. 50 was always full of litter and trash. And if our guys weren't doing it daily, it would look tremendously worse. But they daily are out there, and my direction is get the trash before everything. Mowing is even secondary to the trash. So that's 2 people, and we receive $26,000, I believe, at the moment from DOT per year to pay into that. But of course, those 2 guys are a little bit more than $26,000 a year. Then we've got a very reactive work order system. And when I say that, all those things right underneath, We've got 7 guys. Go out there. And, most of them have regular mowing schedules. They will go out on a complaint basis for any potholes. And certain streets, I notice, are, again, back to asset management. If we keep doing potholes on the same street over and over, at what point do we just resurface the street? Same thing with sidewalks. I am not able to do anything in terms of closing sidewalk gaps or building new needed sidewalks just yet because we're still busy repairing for ADA compliance, any tripping hazards that the city could face litigation if we don't repair. Once I or my team becomes aware of a safety issue like a sidewalk that is lifted and can trip someone, we have 48 hours to do something about it. So, and that's to keep our risk managed. So other things that they do, street sweeping, we have a street sweeper. I am so proud that it's no longer a parking lot street sweeper, but a real street sweeper. And that technically falls not just under streets, but that would be part of your stormwater program if we had a dedicated stormwater program. We mentioned trees and debris collection. If we have an event, whether it's a Second Friday block party or any other types of events that might involve street closures, those are involved. And then we coordinate, Ricky and I, through our signal maintenance issues. Lake County actually has the agreement with DOT, but if it happens in Groveland, between PD and my department, we're the ones reaching out to Lake County or DOT, depending on what the issue is with the traffic signal. Other street items that we address, there are no major road projects or resurfacing. It's currently not happening. Now, again, I have a list of all the roadways that are candidates to do some level of either micro-surfacing to get a little bit more life cycle or full milling and resurfacing where you're going in and doing 2 inches of new asphalt. So, we do know where the greatest needs are, and it should be no surprise to any of us that the greatest needs are on the oldest streets in Groveland and all of Taylorville. So, I could just start naming streets on the hill, all of them. Now, a few of them have that nice exposed brick. I'd like to bring that back, but a lot of these streets actually need new surfaces. So when I mention road projects, I'll give you a couple that come to mind just so you'll have in your mind what I'm meaning. And this is before we jump out and do something brand like actually build a new road. We would want to relook at Beverly Drive. So the Florida Department of Transportation is coming through next fall. They're going to build a 14-foot trail right across Beverly Drive, right in front of our public safety building. Well, at some point, it's a substandard road. Its width is substandard. Its base is substandard. It serves our public safety building. I believe there's going to be a Faith neighborhood facility that tends to generate traffic, especially on food days. So to leave it as is, with all the fire trucks and police vehicles running up and down it, that's one of those roads I would really like to design and rebuild the way it should be, tying it into the trail project, doing our work right after. But that's going to be one of those we have to budget. So we're now updating cost estimates for what that might look like. And in addition to all that, separately, we're working on a signalization of that intersection, not a traffic light, but a beacon that would be a safety beacon that both can be used by public safety as the vehicles are exiting. So they would have the Opticon automatic response to change the light to a red. But the other reason we want one there is we have a crossing plan. Here we have this 14-foot coast-to-coast trail coming through. We would like to have a pedestrian crossing to cross over 50 to the south side, walk the sidewalk to the Gadsden Trail, have a trail connection from Hope, Groveland Elementary School, Elise Tomlin, all crossing there to the Central Florida Coast-to-Coast Trail that DOT is going to build for us. So those are the kind of, when I think of road projects, nothing fancy, just fixing some of our substandard roads right here in the middle of Old Groveland. And I will mention, I didn't want to step on anything with the previous presentation, but you all will be doing CRA meetings and discussing CRA budget. But there are 2 areas that I will say to you that as I look at how the city gets there, that you might want to bring the CRA and that funding opportunity into the conversation, or where the needs are in your CRA. Old streets and open stormwater systems and no maintenance program and no capital program. So with that said, I'm really an optimistic, upbeat guy, I promise. So don't let any of this come across negative.
Just a second, TJ, if you can. Mr. City Manager, we have at 8 o'clock. We don't have to stay to that, right? Because it's not a publicly, okay. Okay, sorry, continue on.
No preventative maintenance at this time, and that includes not just the roads and the sidewalks, but trees. So yeah, I'm not surprised we had a lot of debris after Milton. And most of that debris, by the way, was in older Groveland where the older growth trees are. And I mentioned pavement management. Again, when we collected that data, yes, it was focused on pavement condition, but we also look at other features in the right-of-way that can include, if we didn't already, like we did include sidewalks, but also signage. You can even inventory street trees using that program. And then finally, need additional funding to maintain or resurface before further degradation. And candidly, that is where the city is. I would be happy to dedicate a workshop just to pavement management because basically you're entering an era where you're going to start seeing the roads degrade to you're not resurfacing them anymore. You're rebuilding them at some point. And not all of them, just the worst ones. Let me start off on stormwater. Yeah, we call it a separate division, but it's really kind of put under streets. It really should be its own, division for sure. There are no capital projects. In fact, I'm excited that we might get to do one right here on Lake Avenue because we have a grant and we're combining that with the anticipated streetscape project, and hopefully we can turn that into our first capital project for stormwater since I've been here. So this MS4 permit is very real. I know 3 of you got to hear the workshop presentation a couple months ago. Councilmember Radzik has heard it before. We could always give you a refresher. And the mayor is going to join me and the team on Wednesday, and we're going to go over the same information about stormwater. And all we did in that first presentation was tell you what stormwater is and why you should care, and the fact that the city does have a responsibility under this MS4 permit. What we didn't do in that first workshop was jump into the funding. So, I will tell you, there's been a lot of work done behind the background that I am really looking forward to us and the consultant team presenting to you that gets into what do you really mean about the stormwater program and what is it we need and how much are we spending now? So just a little summary, you're spending basically 0.2 mils of your general fund out of property tax. You're spending that towards staffing of a barely compliant stormwater program with no capital. So this is definitely an area that warrants your further attention. Again, same staff as streets. Will and Ryan are out there filling potholes while they're mowing right away and cleaning out catch basins. So that's about it for our maintenance program. We do receive administrative assistance from the department, and again, routine maintenance of State Road 50. When I say stormwater maintenance, while we're doing that debris collection of trash and doing the mowing, we're doing some level of stormwater maintenance as well, and that is part of State Road 50. And just bear in mind, a lot of these newer neighborhoods that have HOAs, they are quick to tell you, we already cover our stormwater. I wish that were true. I wish that were true. The reality is the overall city has a stormwater system that we are responsible for, along with the Florida Department of Transportation and Lake County in their own rights of way. But what I'm running into a lot with HOAs, and even the big HOAs that have a little bit more financial resources, sometimes things fail. Maybe what they thought was maintenance wasn't really the maintenance that was needed. I hear often mowing of stormwater ponds to be referred to as maintenance, and then I ask, when was the last time you had a vac truck out here to clean out your lines? What's that? So there are issues that are not being addressed in Groveland, even in the newer neighborhoods, that is attributed partially that the city doesn't have anyone there to do that monitoring that the state expects. And then finally, under stormwater, grant funding. So we originally received a $900,000 grant. We've already used a portion of that to get into what the stormwater needs are and whether a dedicated program is warranted. I think intuitively we all know. But the issue is this. We've got about $400,000 left over. We're going to apply it to the Lake Avenue project. And my biggest concern is applying for that next stormwater grant, because if you don't have a program to show that what you build you can maintain, you may not get that grant. And so we don't have a problem doing that with utilities. Water and sewer, clearly enterprise fund, adjusted rate structure, those are the kind of things the state looks at with these grant programs. And so that's where we are. And it's not just state grants. I want to mention to you that I have been actively working Lake County staff through the Lake County Water Authority. They have stormwater grants, but you got to be shovel ready. So that's why we're going to finish design of Lake Avenue. get our first grant from the Lake County Water Authority to add to the state grant, and that's the plan for small projects like that moving forward. But again, this area definitely requires the council's further attention on how we get there. So that completes stormwater. We've got streets and stormwater combined here, April, if you want to hit that.
Yeah. So for FY23, you can see the total spent activity was $1,460,678. For FY 2024, your total budget, or total activity, excuse me, was $1,180,642. For our current budget, it was budgeted at $2,397,700. And then the FY activity year to date, or excuse me, through March, is $512,854. And then the proposed budget for FY26 is $3,338,350. So when you look at that, the 11.9 K increase in the personnel services, again, does not talk about the two streets personnel that TJ is asking for. When you look at that, you're looking at a total including benefits of $58,800 for each of those workers. There is a modest increase in overtime, FICA, retirement, and workers' compensation, and a 10% estimated increase in benefits. The 7K decrease in operating expenses is attributed to professional services, utility services, and operating supplies. So again, just like with the facilities, there is a 717.6K increase in capital outlay that is again attributed to the deferral of projects to FY26 on top of the projects that were planned for FY 2026.
All right, and we're on the home stretch here. I want to move into just a quick slide on solid waste. I mentioned before, we have two different contracts, residential and commercial. All I'm really wanting to do tonight is just remind you, this is yet one more thing under this department. Again, with solid waste, we have ups and downs, I will say. There are periods where I feel like everybody's clicking, the companies are being responsive, and then something goes wrong and we have to get on them again, especially here recently with Waste Connections. Last week, our commercial company had a driver on vacation. Didn't warn us that they had a substitute driver. We ended up with about 15 calls from businesses last week. So those are the kind of things we deal with in harmony with customer service at City Hall under Pam and Aaron's direction. So, I think you're familiar with your residential service. It's once per week trash and recycling. The commercials, not just dumpsters, but those large 20 and 30 cubic yard roll-offs that can be ordered. And then all of our home builders have to use our commercial contractor as they're doing construction. I did want to emphasize, do not want to leave out, and I have managed to leave her out along the way. You'll definitely hear from her at the utilities presentation. But Brenda Toscano, she was very close with this department in her role under the city manager. She was the person that kind of bridged as Paola was coming on to make sure we had continuity with the solid waste contracts. But now in her role as special projects manager, these utility projects and others, she's definitely, her plate is full, but I definitely want to give her kudos. And the same thing with finance. We work as closely as we possibly can with finance department and the utility billing staff. Paola and I are physically at City Hall as much as we are at our own office. And so I have personally seen that that has been a big improvement for the organization for us to talk a lot. In fact, I encourage all the directors to communicate regularly with April and Pam. So with that said, jumping into capital for a moment under streets and stormwater, this is aspirational. We're asking this time not for 100 or 200,000, but 500,000 to be dedicated to actually starting the resurfacing program. I borrowed from Lake County's website that their current estimate is in fact 350,000 per mile to resurface a 2-lane county roadway. And so some of our streets, maybe we could get by a little bit less than that, but not much. I mean, if it's not preventive maintenance and we're doing true pavement management, we're doing a milling and resurfacing. So again, with sidewalks, you would be shocked about how just going in to repair sidewalks completely can eat up a $100,000 budget. So just in one neighborhood, April's, we dropped $36,000 on a sidewalk repair. And again, not because we thought it would be a nice, pretty thing to do, but it was a safety hazard and a risk management threat to the organization, so we took care of that. We continue to budget for a bus shelter that we offer that county. If you will just give us the bus shelter we want, while you're building the bus shelter you want, we'll give you $25,000. We call it tactical location. And I'll use an example. The Elise Tomlin Empowerment Center should already have a bus shelter there, and it's not. And so that's what we're working on with Lake County. Should we offer to pay for it? Should we have to pay for it? But the point is, you budgeting it empowers us to be effective at dealing with the county, that we can hopefully work out an agreement that would come back before you to get more bus shelters. That was the whole idea, is instead of just getting one at a time that they do, let's propose to partner with them. Same thing with trail design. Our biggest trail needs at the moment, since we're moving on the Gadsden Trail, is really the trail concepts that we've got along county roadways. The two front runners are County Road 561, and the concept was from the Coast to Coast Trail, which crosses at 561 and 565A. So everybody, that's right where Lake Mineola Landing is. To do a trail design and then eventually build it along 561, past Palisades, looping around, theoretically along Cherry Lake Road to Cherry Lake Park. What a great idea, unless you're an engineer, and then you find it. And the only way we're gonna ever move forward on that one, or the one that we have conceptualized along Monte Vista Road that would loop back to the South Lake Regional Park, is to partner with the county. So that's where we're at now. We've got one piece of equipment in Public Works that we're needing to add. We've got one truck at the moment for actual Public Works. We'll handle the Woodard and Curran truck separately in that presentation. I mentioned to you before Beverly Drive, so we've at least put enough money in there to fully design everything that we need with Beverly, both the roadway as well as that pedestrian and safety hybrid beacon. Another big one that could fall under CRA, but it's really just a matter of where finance determines the budget should come, is before you design anything in this downtown, you got to study exactly what you're looking to accomplish if you did want to go to 2 days on Orange and Broad. And then once we've really looked at all the implications of, all right, if we're going to do this and we're going in to make any improvements, what else needs to be done while we're looking at that? What stormwater needs are there? What utility relocations might be warranted? Do we want to keep parking as is or change it? Do we want to expand our sidewalks and have wider sidewalks with sidewalk cafes and so forth? And again, before you engineer any of it, you need to study it and flesh that out. And that really, to me, seems like an appropriate CRA role in there as well. For those of you that know the older part, I've got a couple of pet streets that are the worst and that have flooding issues. Is one of those off of Mount Pleasant Road toward Mascot. The other one is down the list, Garden Avenue, pocket flooding there. A lot of it, from what we can tell, is years ago, a lot of illegal filling of dirt went in. I even noticed that there used to be a pond on the west side of Mount Pleasant Road that got filled in. Now one of the, a couple of the neighbors on Garden Avenue now get flooded whenever it rains because of that. So we want to go in and just do some minor improvements. And it comes out of your general fund if we don't have a dedicated stormwater program. I mentioned Monte Vista at Max Hooks. There's $150,000 in there to be able to be utilized to work with Lake County, that basically the developer of Cypress Reserve will be rebuilding Max Hooks Road from 50 down into their project and then stubbing it out. And it will not, as a collector road, Max Hooks will not at first connect to Monte Vista Road, but the county has listened to Lake County. They have program design and possibly construction funds to extend Max Hooks Road to intersect with Monte Vista. So this money is just to utilize with county staff to address any design issues before we ever get into construction. And then finally, not the $500,000 in the first point that would be for a true resurfacing program, but just the reactive, what are the street repairs and sidewalk repairs and safety improvements, traffic calming, all those things that some of which we plan for, like we're currently doing with Maravilla Way and some additional safety improvements there. Some we have to react to as things occur. So that's just a fund there to be able to address those type of items. Under facilities, I mentioned Purrier earlier. Now, the actual rehab of this building would be more than that, but that at least would address the restroom issue if that becomes critical. We've had some ongoing requests through Mr. Walker that we are helping out with minor at the senior center. The Lake David building needs some window change outs. HVAC, I'm always worried about certain buildings where we know after changing out enough HVACs, you start anticipating, okay, what's the next one likely to be? So we've identified City Hall as our biggest vulnerability. Although a lot of work has gone into that public safety building, we've had enough issues with the roof that we've had a thorough assessment, and we basically are suggesting we go ahead and invest in a repair that would preserve the integrity of the building if we can just get the roof addressed. Minor overall leakage, but any leakage is unacceptable on a building that was just built 4 or 5 years ago. So finally, vehicle replacement under facilities. We've budgeted 3 more vehicles separate from streets there. And I'm gonna wrap up right now. A couple of the highlights I just wanted to point out. We've done great in the utility side of thing. We're moving with DOT, so there's some really good things happening for the city, and this department's thankful to be part of it, but there's a whole lot more to do. And so it is absolutely about the money. So utilities, we are doing very well there, making advances, but really some of the challenges we have is getting the right people on the team. Some of our projects that we have ongoing that do fall under utilities can get delayed. I've mentioned supply chain issues, but that's not really as germane to some of the other public works. Really, the big thing is I'm extremely sensitive to the general fund limitations. I sit through all the budget hearings. I understand that raising the millage rate is not the most attractive thing to anybody, whether you're a taxpayer or an elected official or staff. But one of the things that I wanted to press upon you is most of what this department's doing outside of utilities is general fund. And we do have one area that doesn't always have to be general fund, and that's stormwater. And then what steps can we take? Well, that's one of them. Take a deeper look at the stormwater program and what your options are, and help us, help us in making those decisions that can get us closer and closer to being proactive. I will say the repurposing of this position to create the administrative assistant position, focusing on that asset management program and the workflow coordination, that's going to help us become a lot more proactive over time. And then I want to emphasize, if you didn't feel it, there's a tremendous volume of stuff that goes through this department. Between the vehicles, the buildings, all the capital projects, all the stuff, it's a lot. And then I mentioned on here, it's so funny, I wrote this up and realized, oh, they did that last week with the JPA. So you've now done the JPA, but now we got to implement it. And this department will be addressing the roadway transfer issue. We are implementing the utility master plan. We're becoming more proactive. And again, I'm borrowing from what Warden Curran does. I want to not just be proactive, I want to be preventative and predictive. And then evolving into that sincere asset management program. I've mentioned sidewalks and resurfacing needs. I've mentioned the general fund limitations, and I'll say it one more time, utility consideration for stormwater. And there I'm done. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll go a quick round. Start with you, Mr. Radzik.
Public safety roof, that's not an E&O issue, design issue, contractor issue.
So while we were still under warranty and working with the contractor, a lot was accomplished, and we got a lot of things fixed before the building was officially turned over. Now, I know the city attorney's been involved. We've had some other staff that are no longer with us involved. Of course, Chief Ramsey's definitely been involved. But really, we've identified now that we've gone through all that process, what can we do in light of everything to ensure that preserving the integrity of the building that's there, and the investment in just adding additional improvements to that roof. That's the one thing we've identified as a clear-cut need. And I'll be happy to get you more information on what all that entails. Right now, I just wanted to make sure it was in the budget.
That's disappointing, a $9 million building.
I understand.
All right, I'm going to go through these questions, and I'm going to meet with you offline. FYI to the council, last impact fees that this city has ever used was on Bible Camp Road, and that's going back 10, 15 years. We're getting nothing for the money that we're giving to the county on impact fees. So who's ever in our MPO, you might want to think about maybe Max Hooks in Monte Vista, since the county's involved in that. Maybe that's the next use of impact fees. Real quickly, solid waste. That's now general fund. I thought that was a fund by itself.
It's currently, the way it's accommodated is in the general fund, so the contract expenses are general fund expenses. The revenues that are derived through the utility billing still go back into the general fund.
Okay. Speaking of solid waste, they're horrible. Horrible since the new contract was signed. I mean, I've spoken to B, and, I basically told him I was going to go to council. TJ, you were there. I said, I'm going to go to council. I'm going to ask to revoke the contract. That is how bad they've been. Not just in my neighborhood, but throughout the city. Garbage cans thrown. I even talked to Mike about it. I got pictures and I never sent it to him. Garbage cans in the middle of driveways, garbage cans in the middle of the streets, tipped over, broken or otherwise. I don't know what we can do from a council perspective, but I guess we'll wait to the next meeting and, maybe get a nice letter of rebuke. Tipping fees. Did we ever look into getting some tipping fees from those haulers that are coming into Sanpete besides our own?
We don't really have a legal way to, because they're driving through Groveland. So now what we have is an exclusive franchise with Waste Connections for residential and with GFL Environmental for commercial. And we collect those franchise fees.
Okay. Why are we doing any recycling? And I'm serious, why are we doing any recycling? That stuff goes in the garbage truck. China was one of the biggest takers of our reclaimed and whatnot. They ain't taking because they got enough of their own, so why are we recycling? I understand we're being good stewards to the economy, but I'm putting it into a recycling bin, they're putting it into a garbage truck and putting it into a heap. You don't have to answer that, that's rhetorical. You said that you're all out of money because of the hurricane. Is that not going to be reimbursed by FEMA?
FEMA's not expeditious in their reimbursements, so I do not know the status of that, and I have no confidence until it happens.
Okay. On slides 20 and 23, which you don't need to go to, that's where we're basically pushing programs into this year from last year, but that is also going to mean we're pushing the revenues associated with that from last year into this year as well, because this was all expense stuff that we got here. Is that correct?
Well, these are budgeted items that are simply being deferred, that are not coming out of this year's.
Part of the carry forward is going to handle that. Okay, that's what I was trying to say. All right, and then finally.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, members of the council, that may not be fully correct because I'm thinking some of that might be infrastructure surtax capital that we're deferring to see if we can pay cash for part of the fire truck.
Okay, all right.
So it's not a carry forward.
Okay, well, that's good and bad. And finally, when it comes, two things. When we issue a CO, is anyone going out to that house and looking at the swale, looking at the drainage, and because everything was, civil was great, and then you got these big trucks coming in and it's basically disrupting anything. Is anyone going back to make sure that the grade has been kept after it's been sodded and otherwise?
Yes, sir. So you've got Herman as our engineer doing the grading inspections, and then you've got final inspections, not just with the building division, but we've got, actually Woodard and Curran helps us on right-of-way inspections for those finals.
And I'm just going to stop there in the interest of time.
Okay. Ms. Fike?
I'll try to blaze through these. Just a couple questions. You talked about the vacuum systems of sewers, essentially. I understand that leaves, acorns, all the stuff that floats down in any storm, like the gully washer we had the other night. HOAs, you said, often don't attend to their sewers in that regard. How often does that need maintenance? How often do those sewers need that vacuuming to avoid all the other issues that it causes? I mean, what's the rule of thumb?
So to the question, it's about the stormwater systems. In the newer neighborhoods, and I would characterize neighborhoods built since 2000, predominantly hold what's called an environmental resource permit, which we just refer to as the stormwater permit. If they were following the best management practices, it would be an annual approach to cleaning out the pipes. I've found that not to be the case pretty much anywhere.
Including the city isn't doing that for residences that aren't an HOA governed?
If we've identified an issue in a pipe that we own, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It doesn't happen often.
All right, so another question similar to that, the lifted sidewalks. You have 48 hours in which to respond. I understand it, we go through that in my community a lot. Do we have the grinding equipment for that, or is that something we outsource for them to come in and grind it down to the acceptable level that it's not a trip hazard?
We do have the ability to do simple grinding. The issue becomes, especially where we've got live oaks planted 20 years ago next to sidewalks, where it's lifted to a point you literally have to replace it.
And that's right. So then you take those up, take the root out, reapply. And so that we do all of that. We don't outsource
We do,
that.
and when I say we do, we can do short segments of sidewalk, but there are often, like the case in Osprey Cove, we had to bring in a contractor to do that work.
Okay.
And when I say 48 hours, that means once we become aware of it, first thing we do is secure the area and then
Right.
schedule the work.
Okay. Talking about the water education, how do we get the word out? We have to have this CUP, but how do we get the word out about water conservation education and that whole dialogue that we had, or you had early on in the slides?
Well, I will say that there is a tremendous amount of communications going on now between our own communications department reaching out on the fact that we had that reaction to rate structure changes and utility bills and so forth. But at this point, what I'm finding is a lot of the education is one customer at a time, while we still attempt to do citywide social media. And so I have found that the ladies that work at City Hall up front, as well as Samantha joining the team, doing what she's doing, she's one of those people that will do the deep dive with every customer. She's going to look at their usage data, tell them, did you know your system was running at 2 a.m. for 2 hours? Those kind of things. So what we're noticing is we definitely got everyone's attention that they need to pay attention to how much they're using, especially irrigation.
Okay. And so are there metrics that we measure for the CUP? I mean, are there actual measurements that we take a look at to make sure that that certain pockets or pillars are being attended to?
Yes, ma'am. There's a lot of data that we use in terms of, like, we've audited our own system. We look at how much do we pump out of the ground, how much do we treat and send to customers, how much do we bill, how much are we losing. So that kind of approach we're taking. And then there's the other part that we're taking those customers that we know have used the water that pushes them into those top 2 tiers, and we're communicating every month directly with them saying, you've been identified. And at some point, I'm being asked by staff, how many monthly letters do we send these people before we finally conclude, I guess they've got the proper change. They're just going to keep paying this bill.
Okay. And I'm going to ask one last question. I've got more, but just one last thing. On this report, it talked about let me flip. Street sign replacement. And the only reason it popped up is I just had that email I forwarded to you from the young man. How are they identified? Is that like a homeowner calls and says, hey, my sign got blown down in the last storm? I know with Milton there was a lot of that came about, I do. But is that something that if we have a team out working somewhere, they see it, they notify the city, or how does that notification come in?
So what I love about Groveland is it's not just my department. We've got PD, we've got fire, we've got other departments, we've got building services, we've got Woodard and Curran. Anything that's seen out there, they're going to send us the request for a work order. And then we hear from the residents. I wish I could say I've got a guy driving around Groveland looking for signs to replace, but we don't.
Okay, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks, TJ.
Ms. Carroll?
I do have some questions for you, but I think in the general interest of time, I'm gonna just do the one that I think is best suited for April. On the operational expenses, and I don't think I wrote down which one it was, so that's a problem. There was a $102,000 increase, and you started to say it was for professional services. It's towards the end. It was just before stormwater or on stormwater, possibly. Can you tell me what that was for? I'm sorry, I wish I had it in front of me. I wrote down the slide number, but I lost track. Thank you. 16? Admin.
Okay, I apologize. What was your question?
I
I'm
was
flipping
just wondering
trying.
where the $102,000 increase came from.
So most of that is coming from professional services. If you look at, of those items that I looked at there, and so I think I sent out to y'all the report that gave the detailed information. And I know that doesn't show you, compared to last year as the uppage. So when if you'll give me just 1 second, please, apologies here. Who is this? Admin, 541. This is you, TJ, for admin. So some of that is, let's see, all right, here we go. Gotcha. So last year, they didn't have anything budgeted in professional services at all for the admin department, so they budgeted $20,000, so that is a big jump for it. If you look at the other things, I would be more than glad, in the interest of time, I can go through and kind of give that little bit of information for you to show you through the details, to walk you through that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Madam Vice President, Vice Mayor, sorry. Yeah.
TJ, first of all, I want to thank you for always being responsive to the needs that I have. I have many questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to hone in on one that just has my head buzzing. And what is it that's making my head buzz? It's when we came in tonight, there wasn't a new title, so I'm going with the executive assistant. So I look at that, we got an executive assistant that has an assistant that then has a temporary office associate. Make it make sense. I took the notes where it said that the administrative assistant will be tracking, will be doing software, and et cetera. I'm still trying to wrap my head around an executive assistant having an assistant who then has someone else that is doing this job temporarily, administratively. I would like to know how much, number one, what is Paola's title now, and how much of an increase did she get, and when will she be going for supervisory training? Her title, how much of a pay increase did she get, and when will she be going, since she's going to be supervising, when will she be going for supervisory training?
Here we go. I lost my mic for a moment. Vice Mayor Gaines, Mayor Council. So Paola Vasquez has been with the city for 3 years. Her title, she was hired in, I think it was originally advertised to be an admin position that Brenda Toscano once held before she was promoted. We did reclassify it to an executive assistant. The intent was, much like the other 3 executive assistants in the organization, that it would be someone to support the administration of what the director does. The realities of that are there's so much volume of work within this department that one person assisting me is not sufficient. So we have been limping by with Paola in her role and having a temporary employee who's no longer with us as of now for the last couple of weeks, helping her and just processing all of the things that come through. And I would invite, and I'm being very sincere, I would invite any of you to come and spend even a half a day in the office to just get a feel for the amount of stuff from all of these divisions that I've listed for you tonight. So she is currently still with the same title, executive assistant. The compensation justly was 10% and probably should have been more. And what she's being compensated for is she's not really just an executive assistant, if you can even say just an executive assistant for any of our employees. She really is assisting me in managing the operations of the department, and don't let her appearance fool you. She's a very smart person that has stepped up in ways I truly, when I interview her, had no idea to expect that I would have someone that could actually run an office while leaving me to do what a director needs to do all over the city, and then also be able to supervise someone. So she has been supervising the temp position for well more than a year. In fact, I'd have to go back and see when we had brought Heather on board, but Heather's no longer with us. And so I spoke at length with Mr. Hine and the HR director and explained, until we get more help in the office, I can keep throwing guys out there in the field, but things are not going to get better for the department. I'm looking at what we were able to accomplish with Woodard and Curran, and having them come in turnkey with a system already in place that has dramatically changed how we manage utility operations. If I could just take those steps now with my department and have someone dedicated to doing just that, then Paola can assist me in running the rest of the department, which is not just the stuff executive assistants do of fielding the customers as they call in and making sure I'm where I'm supposed to be and all those typical things. She's really, candidly, in front of all of you, she's really moving on her way to an office manager. So to your point, absolutely the next steps is to continue to enhance her training, not just in personnel management, but in office management as well, because I'm always excited to see someone succeed within the organization. And I'll use Brenda again. Thrilled that I was the one that interviewed and selected, and she worked for me for 2 years as an admin assistant. But there's a really good reason why Mr. Hines said, we're going to move Brenda over into this new role, because we saw it. And that's the same thing that's now happening with Paola, is take the talent you've got and cultivate it.
Okay, TJ, almost every department will tell you that they need additional help. I mean, if you're sitting here, almost every department will tell you, we need help. We need additional personnel. What would make it easier for this? If we had additional personnel. So may I go back to my question? So I'm assuming that she doesn't need supervisory training, since you said that she's already supervising, right?
She has been, but it does not remove the fact that we always need to provide our employees additional training opportunities.
Okay. Mr. Hine, this question is for you. Will you be able to tell me this week what other departments have assistants to assistants? If you could get that for me this week, I would really appreciate it. And do you know offhand, you said 10% offhand, how much is she making?
I believe that puts her at approximately $59 per year. And she's hourly, let me add that as well. So her hourly rate, I would have to check, I believe it's 29 off the top of my head.
Supervisor an hourly?
But, okay, so I'm gonna, in the essence of time, I'm gonna let it go. But again, what's her title gonna be? Because when we came in tonight, it was executive assistant. And that blew my mind, to have an executive assistant, to have an administrative assistant, and then in turn, you're going to have a temporary admin office associate. That just, I couldn't wait for my turn for you to make that make sense for me. So what is her salary?
She is an hourly employee, and I'm going to have to check the numbers. She is at approximately $28.36 an hour.
Okay, and what is that times I'm looking for, I understand hourly.
$59,000 a year.
How much?
59.
Okay. I have other questions, but I will let it go. Thank you, TJ.
I know we're all trying to save time, but I really go back to Mr. Radzik's question, and I'm not kidding. Why do we do recycle?
Because the contract says that Waste Connections will provide recycling services, so until we change the contract, they're going to provide recycling services.
So if we tell them we didn't want to do it anymore, what would happen?
We would renegotiate the contract terms.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that was an option to reduce costs and go to once a week pickup. And that's not what was chosen at the time of renewal.
Here you might.
Maybe it needs to circle back around. Yeah. He says that they had it as an option and didn't take it. Do we have a heat map? I'm a visual person too, that says these are the older roads, these are the medium roads, these are the newer roads, where you can say these are the ones that need to have, you're asking us to start looking at that, which I think we ought to be proactive. Do we have a heat map with roads and maybe an overlay with the pipes and the infrastructure, you know, so we can kind of see when the big pig in the python's going to hit us, so to speak?
So I haven't produced the actual heat map for pavement management. I've just got all the data, and we noted that if I were to do a heat map, it'd be right on top of Taylorville. The old platted part, that eldest part of Groveland, and then the streets off of 50 toward Mascot, and then toward.
I'd just like to visualize it. I appreciate the explanation, but be able to see it and see the overlay, so we could, I think as a group, we could really say, hey, you know, this is really a problem. Max Hooks Road, why isn't that county? Why isn't Max Hooks Road with the regional park and all that, why isn't that funded by the county? Why do we have it on our budget?
So the story behind Max Hooks is when the park design occurred and there was going to be a park, and then Groveland engaged and said, let's transfer the park project over to the city. Max Hooks was also part of the discussion, the roadway. So the county had already designed improving Max Hooks from 50 to that northern entrance of the park. And that design included the road, a trail, the stormwater, water, sewer, reclaim. But they didn't design any farther south. Then Cypress Bluff came in a few years ago and said, now we're ready to start designing our subdivision. So we said, hey, we're going to do a development agreement, and we're going to obligate you to design all the rest of it and build all of it. And so now it's obligated that developer do all the infrastructure, which is great for Groveland. The issue then became that Richland's community said, well, if we're going to rebuild Max Hooks, is there a way we can get reimbursed? And we said, well, the city has designated Max Hooks Road as a collector roadway. It's going to connect from 50 to Monte Vista eventually. That's eligible for county road impact fees. So there is an executed agreement between the developer and the Lake County Board of County Commissioners that when they build that new and improved Max Hooks with the trail and everything else, they get impact fee credits. That's the only impact fee deal Groveland's made since I've been here.
So we're not paying for it, the county's paying for it?
The developer will pay, the county will reimburse, and what the county did do to support us is the last piece, is the southern end to get through property that Richlands doesn't own to Monte Vista Road. It's only less than 2,000 feet.
So that's the $100 and something thousand?
That's for design money if needed. That's just to make sure we're able to work with the county, because we formally requested impact fees for Max Hooks Road's extension. It is now moving into their program, so we do have an actual commitment from the county to participate. So this approach of collector roadways, that we either ask as a city for the impact fee money, or we work out these deals that developers do the improvements and then go to the county to get reimbursed.
Okay. While I'm asking the next question, can you pull up the org chart? Yeah. City transportation, do we have any control over the bus routes and the bus timing in the city?
You have influence, but no control.
We have what? Influence?
Influence.
I put this in front of you and the council that in speaking with the superintendent of schools, the biggest issue with after-school programs and being able to tutor is the lack of transportation from the school areas back out to the areas. And that's the biggest single issue that she said that she would really like us to work on, is make transportation available for those students so they can stay after school and get the education they need. Water education specialist, I'd just like to see the job description on that if somebody can send it to me. Sure. Org chart. This is I don't want to beat a dead horse, but Is this correct? Is the water education person the same level as the operations manager, and the executive assistant is the same as the consulting engineer, and the same as the utilities? I mean, is this right as an org chart, or I'm just trying to figure out how, what we were saying earlier, who reports to who, and I'm having a hard time figuring it out.
I can understand, Mayor. I think I just need to redo that one and do it a little bit more like a normal org chart. I was attempting to take an old one and improve it, and I don't know that it's that improved. So the way this works is I've got under me the executive assistant, operations manager, water education engineer, and then of course the O&M. And then you'll notice under executive assistant, yes, an admin assistant position that is an FTE city employee. And bear in mind, we don't have that position filled. We just lost Heather, so we were in the process of bringing Summer on board as a temp. That does not necessarily mean
That's okay,
permanently.
TJ, just give me the
Sorry.
thing. And what I'm gonna do is ask, once I get it, who reports to who, because isn't there some rules about hourly and exempt and non-exempt employees as managers, and in the areas I've supervised in, you can't have hourly employees at a manager. It's a salary exempt or non-exempt position. So I just wish that we would take a look at that to make sure that we're okay. I think everything else, maybe we can just have a sidebar is it, but that org chart would be very interesting to see. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
With that said, any input? Any questions? Any going back around? No? Okay, we adjourn. Thank you so much. I need 5 minutes. I do too, but we're going to have to set up I mean, these are an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes.